find many bicycles in these parts, unless they've been abandoned at the bottom of the hill by people who wanted a once-in-a-lifetime thrill. Try to climb up too quickly and you could get the bends. Indeed, there are parts of this road that you really would need a ladder to get up. But the only way out is up. There are no roads along the flat bottom of the valley, for a very good reason, as you'll discover later on. But I have a bit of cailling to do, about halfway up the mountain, along the road to the bottom of the valley. So, short steps, lean forward, and don't look down. That's the secret. Now the climb was worth it because this is what you can see. If you've ever driven from Newton Stewart or Strabane across the Sperrin Mountains to Draperstown, then you'll know this place. This is the Llanelli Valley in County Tyrone, and that's the Glenelly River, making its harmless looking but not to be trusted way along the floor down there. It's a proper real valley, this. Not one of your half-hearted, gently sloping, let's not frighten the tourists affairs. It's deep, and it's steep, and it's 10 miles long. The sort of place where even the sheep are inclined to get vertigo, and the rabbits think they live in high-rise apartments. Now up here at the wild end of the valley are all these mysterious little roads which meander up the mountainside and get lost in the bog. But this road, clinging to the side, goes all the way to the bottom of the valley and the town of Plum Bridge. Now, I'll get to Plum Bridge by and by, but first, a quick orientation, courtesy of Joe McGurk. If you want to get the most out of a place, then you're best to acquaint yourself with the people. Find out what you can about their little quirks and oddities. Joe here is filling me in on the ancient and honourable Glenelly tradition of distinctive names.
This townland, that's the only way I can explain it really to you know. This townland here, you've got the McGarveys, McCullers and the McBrides. So we'll just start up at the top of the townland. You've got Hughie McGarvey. Now his nickname, or what we might or you might call it a nickname, we called it a distinctive name, is Hughie James Hughie.
James Hughie.
Hughie James Hughie.
Hughie James Hughie.
So in other words, if you're an Englishman come along and says, I'd like to talk to Hugh James Hugh, right? We wouldn't know who that man was, but if you said Hughie James Hughie, we would know your man.
Hughie James Hughie.
Hughie James Hughie. And his father was called James, and his father before that was called Hugh. And ended up the third generation was called Hugh again. You'll come back to Hugh. All the people around here would call their, I would say, eldest son the same name as their father, or maybe a name beside it. You know, just someone, Hugh and then James, right? So he'd be known as Hughie James. And then if that man had a son, they would call him Hughie again. So then that ended up, that's how Hughie James Hughie got his name. I have an idea, I'm not so sure about it. I think that it was to save re-registering land. And that could be, you know, I hear people talking about that's only hearsay. But there could be a wee bit of truth
So
about
the
it.
same name would stay on the deeds, in other words.
And the same names would stay in the deeds, like, and I would know of cases, and people would second me in this, that there are families that the same names on deeds this last 5 centuries, or 5 generations, sorry, for 5 generations, because the same name of the older son was kept. And I think that was part of it. Others would be different. And there was just, I think, as far as names was in these townlands, I mean, Paddy and John and Mickey and Peter, you know, and Hughie and names like that, there was the general run-of-the-mill names. Good old Glen, Kiel, townland names, as we would call them, you know.
Would you know all of the families in the entire length of the valley by their nicknames?
No, I know every family, the nicknames. All top of Glen Kiel here, you've got Hugh McGarvey, they've got McGarvey family, known as Hughie James Hughie. You've got the McGarvey family, again, beside it. Johnny James John, no relation to Hughie, James Hughie. And then you had the Johnny Jamies. Now the Johnny Jamies, they were cousins of Hughie James Hughie's, you know, and they were called McGarvey also. Well, then you have got the McBrides, you've got Mickey Giannetti. And then you've got John Neddy. Now he's a brother of Mickey Giannetti's, but he's just called John Neddy. Because, and then you have the McConnells over here. They called him Francis Charlie McConnell, because his father was called Charlie. You've got John McGarvey down here, they called him John Mickey. And if you wanted a longer version, John Mickey Charlie. And John knows that's his name because his father was Mickey and his grandfather again was Charlie.
3 hours later, with every distinctive name in the place memorised, you head down the valley in a general Plum Bridge direction, and you immediately notice another feature of this place. Bridges, lots of them. And that's because there are streams, lots of them. Another lethal pollutant enters the Mourne system. The fish will be turning belly up from here to Plum Bridge. But this is what I call refreshment. Before the advent of the bridges, of course, everyone had to cross the river this way, at fording places. Dry feet, dry, warm, comfortable feet, are a phenomenon of the late 20th century. Now at the moment, this river is no more than a gentle stream, meandering its way lazily round the boulders. But believe it or not, this trickle of water can transform itself into a raging torrent with frightening suddenness. Without much warning, you can have a brown wall of water and boulders and branches, maybe 25 foot high, come hurtling at you out of the blue with the speed of a galloping horse. What happens is that in the summertime, if it's very hot, you can get a build-up of big thunder clouds which break on the mountains and pour out millions of gallons of water. Now, the sides of this valley are so steep that the swollen streams simply run off it and gather into a huge flash flood on the floor of the Glenelly. And that just charges down the valley with irresistible force, sweeping everything in front of it. And that is precisely what happened in disastrous fashion in the year 1680, some 10 years before the Battle of the Boyne. About 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in the month of June, sudden death struck. All along the valley, which was much more heavily populated then than it is now, large families of people lived, most of them in mud cabins. The noise of the thunder over the mountains prevented them from hearing the thunder approaching along the valley floor. Houses, embankments, farms, livestock and people were all swept away. Only about 30 bodies were ever recovered, and that's reckoned to be only a fraction of the number that actually lost their lives. What happened in 1680 has happened again and again. Every summer, people fear the build-up of thunderclouds on top of the mountain, and at least once every generation, there's a landscape-changing flood. Not quite so devastating as the one we've talked about, because people learned not to build houses down in the floor of the valley. But even so, there have been some frightening downpours. The last really big one was when Paddy Sheeran here was a mere stripling of about 60 years. Paddy is now 92. And as his brother-in-law, the priest, puts it, he's coterminous with the century. Just to put Paddy into some kind of context for you, he was born just as the Boer War was ending. Edward VII was fresh on the throne, and the Wright brothers had not yet flown the first aeroplane. So naturally, he still tends the cattle every day. His memory of that flood, the flood that could have carried away his own house, is still vivid.
Well, it was a lovely day up onto that, and all of a sudden we heard the southwest thunder. And then it was just one big rattle after the other for about 20 minutes or longer. And then the big drops of rain started to come. The drops of rain were as big as one of them would go down in the beginning, it was as big as a plate. Gave big heavy drops, and that increased, and real downpour. You get terrified of it. And we run for the house and got into the house. We were not in the house. We could hear the rattle of the boulders or the rocks coming down the glen. And we thought it was terrible. And the children were crying, and we were trying to pacify them. And we were afraid that the house would be tumbled. That's the truth. It was just actually terrifying.
What would have tumbled the house? The water itself or the
water
boulders?
itself, aye. The force of the water and the height of the water.
How high was it?
I would say it was roughly 18 to 20 foot high coming down down there. I would say it was roughly that.
So it would have been as high as these
It would be
top
as high
banks?
as it would be. It left all that mess behind it.
So what mess, you mean these big boulders down
Aye,
there?
them big boulders, and the number of things you do about it.
It's hard to
Yeah,
believe that water could lift and carry one of those.
We couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. But it was the fact there wasn't a boulder or a rock or a thing to be seen there, only a wee narrow stream. And when it was all over, when we come up and looked at it, it was just terrifying.
Terrifying indeed. Back in the 1960s, the Sperrins lost 14 bridges in one night's flooding. So bridge maintenance in the Glenelly has always been important. even before the EC regulation, which commands these bridges to support 40-ton lorries. No problem for this fine 19th century arch, I'm assured by engineer David Stewart. His main concern, believe it or not, is not the strength of the structure, but the fact that he might be interfering with the home of a bat or a dipper.
Yes, bats and dippers are perhaps in one way the bane of the bridge maintenance man's life. As you probably know, you can be fined up to £2,000 for killing a bat. They're protected.
I wouldn't dream of it anyway, but
at that price,
they're protected
indeed,
species.
They are a protected species, and we do take remarkable care to minimise any upset we have to the bats. We look at the bridge before we ever go near it to do any maintenance work, and we examine it carefully and quite often bring in a bat expert to determine whether bats are in fact housed in the structure. And they can live in tiny little cracks, and nearly all old masonry arches are in fact have cracks develop in them from time to time due to the heavy traffic nowadays.
So we're not talking about bats, just to be clear about this, hanging down under the arch. You're talking about them actually almost burrowing into cracks underneath the structure.
They go through a crack some maybe 25 millimetres or so wide, and they nest in behind the stones. And what we do when we're repairing a bridge with bats in it, for a start we can't go in their breeding season or in their hibernation season. The hibernation is roughly from September through to March, April. We repair those sort of bridges generally June, July, that sort of time when the bats are out and can find other places while we are working on the structure. What we do is we make little caverns, sometimes taking a stone away from beside the crack. We mortar in the void behind, and then we replace the stone, leaving a crack for the bat to get into and leaving them a little void behind to breed and to live in.
I'm sure the bat, regardless, has been very thoughtful.
I'm sure they're delighted.
Before this legislation came along, or before the legislation protecting bats came along, and bridge strengthening was still an ongoing thing, there must have been many a wee bat was entombed.
Indeed, I'm afraid I would have to say that's the case, because it wasn't until maybe the early 80s that we began to appreciate the number of bats that there are in the province, particularly in the west of the province, Tyrone and Fermanagh, and we certainly have been pulling out all the stops since then. All our bridge maintenance folk are trained in how to identify where the bats are and in how to build in little refuges for them in all our masonry bridges. And of course the same goes for the dippers. Dippers are much more easy to work with in that they will fly away as the workmen are working during the day, and they come back at quitting time and nest again on the ledges as we are preparing them really for their nests. They need a slightly larger ledge, something around 100-150 millimetres, and they nest quite happily in that.
Now, be honest, a busy executive who has to look after thousands of miles of roads and something like 7,000 bridges in the province, you were saying altogether, has to stop everything, hold everything back, just to allow for a bat to get his kip.
That's exactly it. But mind you,
is that not a bit frustrating at
times?
Well,
it's not. Once you've held a little bat in your hand, and their fur, it reminded me of mink, and they're delightful little creatures. I think once you've seen one, there's absolutely no difficulty at all in doing all we can to keep them safe and to keep them probably in a drier house than they had before we arrived.
And the workmen who actually work on these things are very aware of that as well. And
absolutely, they're absolutely sold on the bats, and they are really very, very keen, and they have made quite some innovative ideas to develop these shapes by little folding wedges of wood where we can put it in mortar round and then take the wedges out and leave little ledges or little places for the bats. So the men have really come very much into that way of thinking.
They don't knit wee jumpers for them in their spare time or anything like that?
Well, no, they don't do it in department time anyway. What they do in the evenings, I wouldn't know.
Personally, I think it's wonderful that the EC Bridge Strengthening Programme grinds to a halt for the sake of a bat. Quick checklist of the valley's other wildlife as seen on one short walk to Plum Bridge. There's a hawk having caught a quick snack, a glimpse of what is definitely a buzzard. And here's a genuinely unexpected sight, a fox with some poor creature in its jaws, possibly one of these. Some teenage house martins eating their parents out of house and home. Look at that face. Seen it all before. Not impressed. The town of Plum Bridge, nestling snugly in the trees at the foot of the Llanelli Valley. Opening for business. Must remember to ask for a small one. It's a pretty place, the Plum, and here's a man determined to keep it that way. This is Peter Conway, or Peter Addy to give him his distinctive name. Peter has the temperament of a saint, and I think he would need it come the autumn.
It is a tricky job. That's a tricky job in autumn time. Because again, you gather all these leaves up, big heaps, great big heaps, like heaps of hay. And the next thing, what drives past but a fast-moving car or a fast-moving truck. And all your work starts in vain. They blow every road down the road and up the road again. Before you know, you've nothing of the pile at all. You have to start back again and pray that you get all geared up before ever any truck comes down the road again. Some drive slow, some drive pretty slow. They know and they understand. And then you get the odd truck driving very fast to sort of give you the bad humour. But you be in bad humour at them going fast and the leaves all going every road after your bother. But as I say again, you keep it to yourself and say no.
Well, do you think it's ignorance on their part, or do some of them do it with a wee bit of mischievousness perhaps about it?
Oh, just full of mischief.
You say you're
Oh, full of mischief. Aye, full of mischief and devilment. That's how you live by the country. Full of devilment. You can't. No, that'll be all mischief and devilment to get you going. But I paid no attention.
You're slow to get going.
Well, to get, oh, I wouldn't start. No, I'd be slow in getting going. They were good temper that way. Oh, I wouldn't say nothing at all, you know, not at all.
Well, do you ever come out to work in the morning and look around the place and it's totally spotless? There isn't any work for you to do. Would that worry you if you came across that situation?
Oh, that'd be no good to me if there was no work for me to do and the place shining. That'd be no good, not at all. You must have dirt. You must have dirt to keep you there. That'd be no good at all looking at a clean plate. Not at all. You must have dirt. That's why you can't condemn these people at all. They keep you in a job. Not at all.
So you welcome the odd bit of litter?
I do indeed. Oh, I do indeed. I don't criticise the litter at all.
And you obviously take a pride in your work.
Oh, I have a conceit in it. I have a pride in the job.
You do the village of Cranna way up the valley as well?
I do Cranna too. That's my own native town, Cranna. That's a lovely wee town up there.
It is.
Very, very nice up there. I like my own town too, Cranna. I like Plum Bridge, but I like Cranna. Very peaceful. Very, very peaceful. I live up behind the graveyard, the old graveyard in Cranna. And nothing's as nice on a summer's evening. And you're in your own. I'm married myself and have a family, but when they can be out and you in your own, and maybe you go to bed in the early or in the evening maybe, and the sunshine or the sunset shines in the window, and you're lying in your bed and you're looking at the scene and you see the reflection of the headstone up in the scene. That'd be nice. The reflection shines in.
Many a one would think the reflection of a headstone on their ceiling was a cause to be scared.
Oh, not at all. When you see that headstone up shining on the top of the scene, the reflection of it in an evening, a nice bright evening, boy, it's contentment. You know you're in happy land.
Whatever Peter has, I hope it's infectious. This particular happy land of Plum Bridge got its name in quite a curious fashion.
And this is it. This is how the town got its name. They had just put the last stone in place to finish this much-needed bridge when two old fellas started debating its technical merits. Now, one of them was of the opinion that it wasn't as straight as it might be, that the masons, to be brutally frank, had not been up to the job, and it was off the plumb. Whereupon the other old fella, who'd been chewing tobacco at the time, leant across the centre parapet and spat into the river below. Now, I'll spare you the demonstration, but the projectile went straight down into the river without touching anything on its journey. That, he pronounced, is a plum bridge.
Seems a kind of hit and miss method of naming a town, but it doesn't seem to bother anybody here. So there you are. Now here's a question. When you go to Portrush, you buy a bar of rock. What do you buy in Plum Bridge to show you've been to the Glenelly Valley? This man is bound to have the answer. William Pinkerton inherited a small grocer shop and built an empire. Behind this modest shop counter is a vast storehouse of everything you could possibly need for country living.
You'll have to check that. And that's right, that's right. Years ago, we used to make the tea in the mountain, this tea curry.
For straining milk.
For straining milk. In the olden days, you strain milk. I still sell the odd one yet. That's the old time hot water bottle, but they still sell the odd one yet. You see, they're very good for holding the heat.
Oh, the green wellies.
Oh, aye.
You know how it is when you spend a long time in a shop. You feel you have to buy something. Is there any point in somebody like me buying one of these at all?
Oh, certainly. Why not? For you can use that stick for working with sheep. You can use it. Sure, it's nice to go out and even catch that for a walk there. You can hang it up in the living room, hang it up somewhere for the lawn or the hallway, anywhere at all for an ornament. It's nice to hang up.
If I were to walk around Plum Bridge with this, you don't think people would...
No, they'll just see us. Bought it and Pinkerton's there. Pinkerton got a sale this evening again.
I sold that critter.
I sold that critter there. Probably done them to the teeth on it, but what odds?
They wouldn't laugh?
No, I wouldn't. No,
You don't think so?
I would laugh, surely.
If you buy a bar of rock and Portrush, at least you can eat it. What do you do with a shepherd's crook? Thankfully, as I make my way back up the Glenelly Valley, only the sheep are laughing. Sheep are big business here. Sheep marts, sheep shearing competitions. This is the waiting room, not a magazine in sight. And sheepdog trials. Paddy Joe Kearney here is an expert at that. Trouble is, he has one big handicap. You can't whistle at all?
Can't whistle.
Did you ever try to whistle?
I did. I tried. I may have maybe if it was in close to me, I would have a short whistle, just a wee quick whistle like that, but I just can't whistle.
You grew up in a place where shepherding was
Yes.
very much one of the jobs that you'd be expected to do.
Oh, aye. Oh, aye.
And when did you first realise that you couldn't whistle, that you weren't going to be able
Well,
to whistle?
I remember watching my father putting his two fingers in his mouth like that there, and you'd hear him 2 miles away. I watched him and I tried it, and all I could get was just a blow. I couldn't get a sound at all. And I see plenty of people doing different ways.
I can't do that.
And I can't do it. I bought the small dog whistle. No good. I just can't get it.
I have bought myself a shepherd's crook. I mean, do you not feel the need to, whenever you're shouting at the dog, do you lean on something?
No, I haven't the patience. I couldn't stand in one place. I'm moving around. I couldn't. When I'm shouting at the dog, I'm moving back and forward.
Right.
With the dogs disappearing in sight, so I just couldn't. I couldn't stand at the post for 5 minutes and lean on it, so I couldn't.
That's what they do, really, isn't it?
Yes, that's what they do.
They lean on it?
Yes, they lean on it.
Is there a way of leaning on it
There
particularly?
is. Mostly all is, I don't know. I haven't used it, but they seem to have an arc and leaning on the stick.
Two hands?
No, I don't think so. No, they more or less have one under one arm, more or less. Yes,
That kind of
that's more
Long
like
John
that.
Silver
That's
kind
more
of
like
thing?
it there. Not more like that. Very relaxed looking.
Right.
That's more like it there.
That's
now.
it?
Yes, that's it.
So all
there.
I need to do
Yes.
is stick the
All
fingers
you
in
have to
my
do
mouth.
now is
Hereby.
get the collie and
Right.
a bit of practice and you'll be there.
Okay.